Now, Irene, you say that you believe that humans are actually built to run. If that's the case, why do we injure ourselves?
Well, I think that the reason that we injure ourselves is that we're not doing it right. So if we evolved to run, then you probably wouldn't get injured. 30 to 70% of runners get injured in a given year. And it would be like fish getting fin injuries, I use this example, or birds getting wing injuries. I mean, if you're designed to do it, then you shouldn't be injured at that rate. That tells me we're doing something wrong. And our research that was independent of barefoot running, I was doing this impact research long before the barefoot running sort of trend began, and we were finding that that impact was related to injuries. And I never really put it together until I started looking at people who run barefoot. And a lot of these barefoot communities, they report that they don't have the same kind of injuries. Now that's a bit anecdotal, and I admit that, but basically they say, they don't have the same kinds of plantar fasciitis and some of the injuries that we have. And it's kind of interesting because when you run barefoot, you don't land on your heel. You don't have that impact that we've been spending 10 years studying before. So I came at this not expecting to be a proponent of barefoot running. When I was doing this research, I was really just looking at these impacts, trying to understand them, teaching people to run softer, when all I really ever had to do is get their shoes off and they would do what they're naturally supposed to do.
In your presentation, you went through the evolution of thought for you. That
Yes.
You didn't start off from this position at all.
Not at all. Not at all. I think I was very much embedded with the podiatry world. I was speaking at the PFOLA. It's a large group of podiatrists in the United States, every single meeting. My thought process was that we have some feet that can't function normally, and so we need to go in and support them. But it's funny because it flies in the face of my philosophy of treatment. I started out in rehab, working with spinal cord patients who needed wheelchairs, and we would always try to get them the chair that gave them the least amount of support to try to facilitate their balance. People with leg braces, I would give them the lowest profile brace because I wanted them to develop the musculature as much as they could, and yet I wasn't thinking that way with the foot orthotics. I got ingrained in this way of thinking, and it wasn't until sort of all of this kind of came together. I call it a perfect storm for me. I wasn't planning it, and I have no real vested interest in either orthotics or shoes. I have a vested interest in evidence.
It's interesting. I mean, evolving as a scientist can be a confronting thing.
It can.
I mean, how have you found it? It's a controversial subject.
I think when you've been around for a while, and I've been around for a while, it's risky to come out with these statements when you're young and you're trying to protect your career and you're not trying to make big blunders. But I've been at it for a while. I feel very confident in the research that we have done. I feel confident in the research that I provide to back up the approach that I'm taking. And really, there's no evidence that points me in the other direction. So if you talk about footwear, there are no studies that show that all of this technology in shoes is doing anything to injuries. And yet I'm being challenged, and I should be challenged, to provide evidence that going with less footwear provides a way to protect you from injuries. It's interesting how people sort of just buy lock, stock, and barrel the idea that we need all this extra support and cushioning in shoes, but there's no evidence for that.
It must be very confronting for people who have actually believed in the cushioning of shoes to now hear you.
It is. It is. I mean, today you go to a shoe store and they're going to take your shoes off. You're going to do the wet foot test, right? You're going to step down. They're going to look at your footprint. And they're going to go, oh, you need a cushioning shoe. You need a motion control shoe. And I want to try to spread the word that people need to challenge that thinking. And here is some evidence that you can go to the shoe company or shoe store with and say, look, there's no evidence for this.
Now, it's interesting what you've been saying also about how doctors should be prescribing exercise as part of a treatment plan.
Yes.
Can you expand on that for me?
Yeah, so I think all of this is sort of moving towards this whole getting back to the way we were designed to live. I think we are disevolving. We weren't meant to be sitting at desks for 8 hours at a time. We weren't meant to get in our car and drive. We weren't meant to eat things out of boxes. And I don't think that, I'm not one of these people that thinks, so we got to go back to that. But we need to somehow, I think, for our own health, get back closer to the kind of lifestyle that we were meant to lead. So if we are at a desk, I spend a lot of time in front of a computer. I now try to introduce the exercise into my life. I've been trying to do that so that I can at least replace that. And so this whole exercise is medicine campaign that the American College of Sports Medicine is promoting basically is trying to substitute medication when you can eventually with exercise, or at least augment it with exercise, and hopefully people will be able to reduce the medications that they're on. It's interesting. There was a study. There's a book out called Spark, and the book relates to the study of how exercise affects the brain, and compared the effects of Prozac, the effects of Ritalin, and the effects of exercise on the brain. So there are certain neurotransmitters that the brain produces, and exercise basically was just as effective in producing these as the drugs. And so I think it just goes back to that natural, we need to get back to doing things naturally, to depending on our bodies and what they were meant to do, and it kind of relates to shoes. I mean, when you put a shoe on that supports the arch, grabs the heel, and there are all those muscles that do that, that control that. Now you take away that function, guess what? You make a foot that, in my opinion, is less resistant to injury.
Now, women everywhere are going to love you because actually you wear heels, don't you?
I know. And I will be the first to admit that heels are probably not the best footwear because they do perturb the natural way that you walk. And I'm just not willing to give them up. But I spend a lot of time barefoot. I spend a lot of time in my flip-flops. I wear flip-flops all through the wintertime. And I don't have a problem. Now, if I start to develop a problem, I'm not going to be silly about it, and I'm going to probably get away from it. I mean, right now I'm feeling a little bit of pressure on the ball of my foot because I've been up in these shoes for a long period of time. So clearly, I think you have to be careful and everything in moderation. But that still doesn't take away the fact that I believe that getting away from, at least in an athletic sense, shoes that make us, that promote us landing on our heels and having impacts. I think that really we need to get away from that and start moving towards a more natural foot strike pattern.
Just one quick last question. You've just got a new position heading up the Spalding National Running Centre. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, so this is a really exciting project, and actually they hired me, they created this position for me to develop this center that's going to be a combined clinical and research center aimed at studying running mechanics and running injuries and other locomotor problems. So we will be looking at gait as well. So basically they will feed each other. And I think it's very important when you're a clinician to have evidence that backs up what you do. And we're going to be creating that evidence as we go along. So I think it's unique, and we need the clinical problems to sort of fuel the research. So it's really going to be great. We have people coming to visit. We actually have someone from Australia starting with us in January. So we're hoping it's going to be a training facility for people who want to come and learn more about. And I learn from every single person that I work with. So it's very exciting. We're in the heart of medicine and science and runners in Boston. We just had the Boston Marathon, which was amazing. So I'm really excited about the project.
Do you feel like a running revolutionary? Because you sound like one.
I feel like I am kind of paving the way in a sense, but there have been people before me that really started paving this way. So I would have to say Chris McDougall, although he's a New York Times journalist and he's an author, has done more for this movement than any of my research. I mean, you haven't read my research. She hasn't read my research. I mean, people basically read books, and this is an amazing story that has really started this change. It's been that book. So I credit him for being really the change maker, and I'm just coming along trying to really move the clinical world and even the research world and provide the evidence for something that I really believe in, and my thought process has evolved to. So I think it's a combination of a lot of people kind of pushing this forward.
Fantastic. Now, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just think that if by listening to the things that I say and some of our research, people at least open up their minds to this, I feel like I've done my job. I'm not going to convince everybody, but I think it's really important for everybody to be willing to let go of their dogma. And it's not easy because I had to do it myself, and at least be open, because the truth changes. The truth today may not be the truth in 50 years from now. And what I'm saying to you right now may not be truth 50 years from now. But you need to be open and be willing to change your mind about some things.